So today I'm going to talk about preparing for an audit. It's one of those things that I'm sure all of you love to do. Happens to you on occasion. There's no getting out of it. It's going to happen no matter what. So the better you're prepared for that event, the better off you're going to be. Now you guys probably go through 1, 2, maybe even 3 different types of audits during the course of a year. For 20 years, I was doing probably anywhere from 30 operator audits, which operator audits for me would be LPG operators, LNG operators, transmission companies, LDCs, and municipalities. Then also in my state, we did 957 master meter inspections every year. So I probably did more audits than you have. Now our audits would range anything from 3 days for our smaller operators, for our very small municipalities. They may only have 3 to 5 people who run the entire gas system, to an operator with over 1.2 million customers, and we would be on the audit trail with them for almost 8 weeks every year. And in Arizona, we did do our audits every year on every operator. Now, I've heard some conversations. I've heard some talk about inspections and inspectors. And understand, there's really, state inspectors go through the exact same training that the federal inspectors go through. It's part of the certification program that states have with the federal government, and that's what entitles states through their pipeline safety programs to actually go out and do the enforcement action on operators. So that's how intra-state operators fall under the jurisdiction of states. And through that agreement, we do have an extensive series of guidelines that we have to follow as state regulators. Every program does. And within that is part of that training. We have core classes, depending on what the jurisdiction of that agency is, that we have to take. In my case, our core classes consisted of 23 weeks of training with PHMSA and 9 weeks of in-house training through the state. Because we have what we like to always refer to as one-stop shopping. We had jurisdiction on 192, 193, 195 operators, LNG, LPG, and we were also, through another certification program, we were interstate agents, so we acted on behalf of the federal government, and we actually conducted interstate inspections also. I'm sure some of your agencies out here on the east have those same arrangements, where they are one-stop shopping, or they just have a gas program, or one section just does liquid programs. But it's all done under certification and agreement with the feds. And one of the things that the feds allow us to do as state programs is that we can enact more stringent regulations on top of the federal regulations. And I'm sure you're all aware of those. So not only do you have to comply with the federal regulations, you also, as intrastate operators, have to comply with the state regulations also. Last count, when I was chairman of NAPSR, there were over 1,300 additional regulations imposed by states on top of 192 and 195. So always be mindful, always stay in communication as best you can with your public utility commissions and your pipeline safety groups to make sure that you're on top of and keeping track of all those changes in state regulations on top of 192. Now, in preparation for an audit, there are several things that you can do right off the get-go. You can conduct internal audits. Now, this will help you identify potential issues that may or may not be identified by the auditor when they come out and do your inspections. It also demonstrates your willingness to be proactive in identifying issues with within your operations and maintenance plans, within your O&M and how you're conducting business. Now, how does that help you? Well, it helps you identify problems and makes you a safer operator. But it also shows that willingness to be proactive. And once you find an issue, take actions to mitigate whatever that issue is. So like Dennis said earlier, you can't unwind the clock. Violation is a violation. But if you can show where you identified it yourself and you started taking those mitigative actions to make those corrections, it goes a long way with your regulators to demonstrate that you are that proactive person. I am concerned about pipeline safety. And it may reduce an NOV down to a notice of amendment, or it still may remain an NOV, but there won't be any fines associated with it. Not a guarantee, but it's a good step in the right direction. Third-party audits, again, you ID potential issues. It reduces the possibility of cronyism. So sometimes I use blunt words because those are the only words that are appropriate. I've worked with somebody for a very long time and I don't want to get them in trouble, so I'm going to look the other way. I'm not going to do what I'm really trying to do, my internal audit, so it may not get corrected. Third-party audits put fresh eyes on your system. We've all had documents in front of ourselves and sitting on our desk where we've reviewed it, and then you send it to the wrong person. You send it to the right person, but it's got the wrong name on the document. You become complacent. You need to get somebody else to review that, to look at your system for you. And again, it assists in dealing with workplace complacency. Complacency is the death of a pipeline system. I've been doing it this way. I'm going to keep doing it this way. I'm pretty sure I'm doing it right, but we'll see. And that's that one little favorite regulation that a lot of auditors like to look at, 192-605B. Are you looking at those procedures in real time? Third party, third eyes, fresh eyes, new look. 605B8. Start date. This is going to be your first communication with your regulator. Someone's going to call up your office and they're going to say, hey, we're going to do an audit. And they may just throw out a date and say, I want to be there on February 2nd. That's when we're going to start. I'm going to do it for 10 days and then we're going to go. Well, look carefully at the suggested dates. Just don't say okay. You need to prepare. You have a team you've got to put together. You have steps that you have to take to get ready. Don't be argumentative, but be cooperative, but just don't say okay. Because then that saves you from maybe having to change the date later and getting into a confrontation. But really, you want to just keep those lines of communication open with your auditor. Conflicts in existing schedules need to be considered and resolved. So you have to make sure that everybody that you want on your team is going to be available when you want them. You don't want to start that audit and then, well, I've got guys that want to go on vacation, so I'll just use this guy instead. He'll fill in. It's not the way to do it. So negotiate those times, be cordial, but make sure that everybody can live with the dates that you select. So what will be addressed in the audit? Forms and checklists. Before they come out, before that audit begins, and after your first communication with them, ask them, what are we going to be looking at? What type of audit are we doing? Are we doing a specialized inspection? Am I looking at just the OQ, just the drug and alcohol? Is it a broad-based O&M? Are we just going to look at everything? Have them provide you with those forms and checklists that they're going to be utilizing. Now, some states use the federal forms, and you'll find those online. You can get them, but you should still insist that they provide you with those forms. That's their job. They may be using state forms. I know in Arizona, you couldn't go online and find my forms because those are in-house forms. We develop all of our own checklists. We would take the federal checklist, we would put our own spin on them, we would ask additional questions or different questions, or the same question in a different way, but we also incorporate all of our state rules into those checklists too, so everybody's fully aware what we're going to be looking for. Request the inspector to provide you with copies of all of those forms and checklists that they're going to be using. And then you start preparing your team, putting the people together that are going to be the ones that you want to have on your team. So select staff that share the same goals and policies as the company. This is not the time to put the person on your team that you don't get along with, or that thinks that they have a better idea how they're going to run the company, because the last thing you want him to do, even if the person never says a word, just their body language alone can send you right to the bottom. A couple of eye rolls, a big gasp, oh, geez, we're bringing that up. These are all things that I, as the inspector, have seen time and time again. Assure that your team members are knowledgeable in the areas they will be called upon to provide answers for. You don't want people in there answering questions about corrosion Who's your measurement tech? They're not going to have the right answers. They're not going to, even if they have the answers, they can't go into depth as a rule. They know their part. But you need to make sure that they know the part that they're going to be questioned on. Eliminating all scheduling conflicts. No vacations. No. Find out if they've got even a half-a-day event. You want them focused on the audit. You want them there for the whole thing, for their part. If the audit will include a field component, make sure that all necessary field personnel will be available. So as an auditor, when I'm out there doing a field verification on OQ, I want usually the person who did that work initially and whose name is on that record to be the one that I want to OQ. I'm not looking for a ringer. I'm not looking for the best guy that you got in the house. Usually an auditor will select their field where they're going to go check something based on the records that they have in hand. So when they select a record, that's the person they're going to be looking for. So to the best of your abilities, try to make sure that that's the person that's going to be in the field. Just saves a lot of questions and eliminates that conspiracy theory somewhere down the road. Preparing your team. Make sure you review fully with your team exactly what will be expected of them and what their roles will be during the audit. Nobody should be surprised by anything that goes on your side of the table. So your team should be prepared for everything and anything that's going to be thrown out. That's preparing, that's rehearsing, that's going through those checklists, making sure that you're addressing all those issues with your team. Instruct your team members not to attempt to answer any question they're not comfortable in answering. It's okay to tell the auditor, I'm not sure, let me check on that. I want to make sure I get you the right information. It's an acceptable answer, provided you get back with them. If you just do it to try to postpone or diffuse or deflect, that's wrong answer. But you can tell them that I don't have it. And then you can get back with that auditor and give them the information. And I should say, when I say him, it's gender neutral. I do mean everybody. So I'm old, I slip. Instruct your team members not to overtalk a topic or offer more information than what is being requested by the auditor. This is not a time to go into a dissertation about the philosophies of how I manage my system. This is a time that you answer a question with an answer, make a statement, and wait for the next question. So don't provide more than you're asked. Is anybody here giving depositions? Does it help if you drag on? Does it help if you continue to talk after the question's over? No, never. Stay on topic at all times. Don't deviate. You have a question, you have a course of topic that you're discussing, stay there. The auditor will decide when he's ready to change the topic or the subject of the questions. So don't talk over each other. Don't have sidebar conversations about a different part of your operation or even about the operation you're having. As an auditor, if I'm having a conversation, a Q&A with one person, and I hear people over at the end of the table talking something else, I'll still listen to you, but I'm hearing them. And I want to know what they're saying. And that'll probably lead me down another rabbit hole. I'm going to start asking them about what they were talking about. So sometimes the sidebar conversations lead to the next question. Instruct your team that if they need a break, to speak up. Everybody on your team should be adults. They should know when they have to take a break. Let them stretch. Don't sit there and wiggle. Get up and go do your business. Just stop. Sometimes when people are thinking about other things, they're not really doing the job that you want them to do, and they're not answering the questions in the way that they should be answering. Maybe they just want to give them a quick answer and get out of the room. So take a break when you need one. Take a break if you think that one of your team members are going down the wrong place. Just call a timeout. Drag them into the hall and have a conversation. Find out where it was going. Find out if it's going to have a happy ending. If you or your team does not know the answer to a question or are having difficulty in locating a document, say so with the caveat that you will locate and provide the requested information as soon as possible, and then follow through with that statement. There's nothing that would aggravate me as an auditor more than getting to the end of the day and I'm still waiting for something. So now we got to drag that into the next day. Then my little conspiracy theories start rolling around in my head. And I go, well, why can't they find it? What are they doing? I have had people fabricate documentation, and we've taken them to task. And they've been on the verge of going to jail. So these are things that always pop into auditors' minds. So if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. Do not respond emotionally to any issue brought up by the auditor. This is not an emotional time. This is a time that is all business, all professionals. Don't roll your eyes. Don't take the sigh. Don't, oh, geez, I wonder what's going to happen now. At the commission, we actually had to go through a class as to how to behave in public. Because when the commissioners are up at their dais and we're sitting at the witness tables, they have cameras that point back at the audience. And they review, much to my displeasure, I found out, because I learned this one the hard way, they review those camera tapes. So I'm done with the hearing. Before I get out of the building, the chairman calls me into his office. He goes, Robert, I want you to watch something. And I was looking at it, and I looked pretty good. I was younger, I was thinner, but I kept doing this. Never go like this when the chairman's talking. So then our public information officer sat down with me and the rest of my staff, and we had a conversation about how we will behave. And it never happened again. Do not be overly expressive with hand, body, or facial expressions. If an operations question is not regulatory in nature, feel free to question the auditor as to why are you asking the question. Could be a survey, could be a trick, could be taking you down another path. Feel free to ask them why. Don't deny them the answer, but ask why. Sometimes the auditor will just say, well, we're doing a study, we're trying to collect some information, we're trying to go see if we need to make any changes, maybe in our regulations, or we're doing a study to see what are the causes of these failures, or whatever the case may be. But feel free to ask the question. Just don't be submissive to the entire thing. This is your system. You're the operator. Nobody knows your systems better than you do. So try to stay in control. And that's one of the things that PHMSA comes out in audit states too. Every year, they would spend a week in my office auditing all of my documentation and paperwork to make sure that I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. But they would also spend a week in the field with one of my inspectors of their choice. And before I became program manager, they selected me a couple of times. And the one thing that PHMSA looks for when they're out on the road with a state inspector is they want to make sure that the state inspector maintains control of the audit at all times. You want to have that same goal. Don't get into a fight, but try to remain in control of you and your team at all times. But that's exactly what PHMSA is looking for from their state partners when we're out there with them. Review thoroughly with your team all the checklists and forms provided by the inspector and auditor. What I liked more than anything is when I would get out there to begin the audit, and we'd go through the obligatory, hi, how you doing, how you been? But then to see that there's an inspection checklist on their side of the table, and it's completely filled out with section, paragraph, line, section, paragraph, line. They know what they're doing. They prepared. So the audit's going to go smoother. The audit's going to go quicker. Everybody's going to get home faster. And it's going to be a much easier process than if you're scrambling for every answer, every question. And you're flipping through pages or you're scanning through your computers. Be ready. Know where that information is at so that you can provide that information. The auditor appreciates it. They really do. And I have given this presentation with other auditors in the room, by the way, so Most of the time, their heads are going like this. Sometimes not so much, but. Answer all questions on the checklist and forms provided by the inspector auditor as comprehensively as you can. Include locations, like I said, of information can be found in the manuals and in your plans. Assemble all supporting documents that will be required to demonstrate compliance. So you know if they're asking about reg stations. They're going to go in, first they're going to want to see your procedures, how we do it. Then they're going to want to see the records when it was done. And what else can the auditor ask for during that audit? He's looked at your documents, he's looked at records. What else can he look for or ask for? Absolutely anything they want. If you don't give it to them, you're going to get a letter from the commission, and then you're going to give it to them. So if it's asked, provide it to the best of your abilities. If it's a document that's in storage or might be archived, it may take you a while to get it, and you can explain that. But they're going to get it, so provide it. If records necessary for the audit are not readily available, make arrangements to be able to retrieve the necessary records at the time of the audit. Do not provide records or documents until they are asked for. Any record or document not readily available, discuss the issue with the inspector and ask how long do you have to locate and provide that document. With myself and my team, my staff, I would give them right up until the point that they're putting that final draft of the audit findings together. So there have been times where the NOV was there right up until the day before we had the exit with the operator. So, but that's by mutual agreement, conversation. Everybody tells everybody what the expectations are. And there should be another bullet in here that states that you're going to provide them with the documents and records that they want to see, but don't put anything in the auditor's hands that you haven't reviewed, preferably before it was even asked for, so that you're not surprised when the auditor goes, well, what's this? You should have that full explanation as to what this is. And if it's something that you've identified during a self-identification audit or a third-party audit, you're also going to have all that supporting records and documentation that go along with it that says, yep, we knew this was here, and let me explain to you what we're doing. That way, an NOV may just become a note on the audit. Do not agree with every recommendation unless you truly agree with that recommendation. Capitulation is not necessarily compliance. When I first took over the program in Arizona, I took it over from a manager who had a reputation for being pretty hard. And because of that, he drove his staff pretty hard, and his staff drove the operators pretty hard. Well, granted, it made for a safe system, but not necessarily an effective, efficient, or economical system all the time. There were a number of instances where corrections or changes were made to the pipeline system that weren't regulatory. They didn't enhance pipeline safety. It was just the way somebody envisioned it should be done in their mind. And the operators, rather than argue, capitulated. All right, we'll make that change. Well, they hired me, the evil contractor, to be a regulator. It's kind of like hire a thief to catch a thief. But I went out on my first round of audits, and I was seeing things in the field. I go, well, why would you do that? And I must admit that there were a couple times when I was a contractor that they would come out and audit me, and they would ask me to make a change in a system. And at that time, it didn't bother me at all because, again, I'm the contractor. So every time that a regulator told me to do something outside the regulation, if he can convince my customer that I had to do it, I could bill for it. But it's not the way to run your business. So if it's important, if it's regulatory, it'll be on your report. Or if it's something that you truly believe will enhance your operation and enhance pipeline safety, if you agree with the recommendation, go ahead and make the change. But don't do it just because somebody said so. Fully evaluate what that recommendation is. The exit and report. Following the audit, the inspector auditor should provide you with an exit meeting on the last day of the audit. That's pretty much standard guideline PHMSA to State 101. Purpose of this exit is to provide you with an overview of any potential issues identified during that entire audit process. The final report should follow the audit. Ask the inspector auditor when you should expect to see that final report. Now, since I've been on this side, talked to some operators in other areas of the country, I found out that maybe some of my NAPSR brethren weren't really telling me the whole truth when they told me about their programs when I was the chairman of NAPSR. Because that report should follow 30 days after your exit. If you don't see that report in 30 days, I would strongly urge you to get on the phone and call. Find out when it's coming. No news in this industry does not mean good news. No news means just that. I got nothing. I got no news at all. If you found something, I need to know about it. If they discussed an issue during the exit and it's a safety issue, where is that report? I need to know exactly what it is that you want me to correct. I need to know what action I need to be taking. So get that report. I've heard, honest to God, there was one company that has gone over a year. They went into their next inspection cycle. They never got the report from the previous inspection. A whole year lost. It doesn't work for anybody. So get the info, make the call, make them do their job. Again, no news is not good news. Remain calm, be friendly, and everybody's going to survive the audit. Remember, arguing with an inspector is like wrestling with a pig in the mud. Eventually, you realize the pig is having a good time. Okay? This is what we do for a living. This is what you do because you have to. So keep that in mind. They got nothing better to do. Any questions? All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You said the state document may be different than the federal document.
Correct.
What's the likelihood of your regulator giving you a copy of the state document?
Pretty good. Like he should. He should, she should, they should, it should. Whatever you're dealing with should give you a copy.
And is that an obligation, or is it just a nice to do?
No, it's in our guidelines that the states will provide a copy of the inspection. It's in PHMSA's policy that they will provide you a copy of the inspection that they're going to be conducting. PHMSA switched over to a more computer-based IA, which stands for Inspection Assistant Forms. Well, we found from a state's perspective, many of the states, they weren't able to integrate the distribution regulations that were changed or enhanced by the states into those forms. So about 50-50 is where the states landed on that. Half of them are still utilizing their own inspection report forms, and half of them have just completely adopted the PHMSA forms, and then they have almost a handwritten checklist for the state regulations that apply to that form. So. All right, well, when everybody goes through your next inspection cycle, think of me. The other thing I don't want you to ever do when you're being questioned by an inspector, especially when you're in the field, and they ask you a question like, do you really think you need line markers out there, or do you think you should have line markers out there? Don't do this. Because once you start looking at the dirt, we own you. We know that we're winning right there at that point in time. So enjoy, take care, be safe, and let's all enhance pipeline safety.